So, can you just like talk about how like a lot of people just sometimes people just kind of fall into voice work, but like how did you kind of get started with it? Was it something you always kind of were passionate about?
Well, hi, by the way. Uh, I have always been passionate about it. I pursued it, but I think the thing that you learn along the way is that in gaming, in animation, and in anything sort of voice driven, as a rule, they're not looking for a voice, they're looking for a character. So if you don't bring an acting background to it, the odds are you may score something just based on a quirk, but you will be at least recognized and remembered if you dive into that character. And what's happening, particularly in the gaming world, is there's such a vested interest in the outcome of these games, sometimes through first person, sometimes third person, but either way, worlds hang in the balance, and it's such an immersive experience that if the voice cast of shows doesn't create that level of urgency, it's not going to play. It's not going to play to the degree that it does with those of us who just dive in whole hog.
Can you talk a bit about how your approach for both the GI Joe, the Spirit voice, and Grimlock as well? Like those are both classic voices. So how did you kind of first come into those roles?
Well, I read everything that the writer writes, and I look for every clue there is in a face. And Grimlock had a slight lockjaw. They said he had a restriction in that area. So when I first started doing the voice, then I thought, well, that's getting a little restricted even vocally. So then I realized I had these big muscles and heavy aggression and not big brain. So me, Grimlock, emerged sort of like this. Lots to do and good attitude. Some restriction. Not just jaw. Spirit really hinges on one key thing, which is that he says, possibility and impossibility are states of mind. In my mind, there is only the possible, that which can be done. So that sets him up against Storm Shadow. It's the most positive outlook you could possibly have. He's a peaceful warrior, and those are great big traits to be entrusted with. I take it seriously. I take everything I do seriously. And when you take comedic characters seriously, they come out funny. When you take epic characters seriously, they come out epic.
So, can you talk about like both the I grew up on both of the series, obviously. So like I'm 32. So just what kind of like expectations did you have going into these roles? Like, were you imagining this long of a run for both series, or?
I don't think anybody has a crystal ball. I don't think anybody can look into the future, but you are obligated to treat everything as though it might have some future life. I don't think I was the new kid. I was relatively new even in town when these things happened for me, wonderful things. And frankly, so busy in those days that the agents were working like air traffic controllers. It's like you have a 3 o'clock, you have a 4 o'clock, you have to get back to your 2 o'clock. What about lunch? Drive through. But I don't think, I think it's a bigger question because I don't think anybody can have a sense of the largeness or smallness of something at the time you're doing it. I believe there are things that are done that are genius that for whatever reason don't resonate, or they don't resonate at the time they're supposed to, so they go away. And it doesn't mean they weren't the next big thing. They just didn't become the next big thing. But what's humbling for me, G.I. Joe and Transformers, and I should point out that Shout Factory has released this extraordinary boxed set of each, and not only in the content, which people are familiar with, but in the presentation of these box sets, which are so cool. They really have, I don't think anybody's slept for months. It's very, very well thought out, and presentation is important to an audience that is passionate about it. Anyway, they are phenomenal.
So what was it? Did you do like commentary tracks for that whole set, or what was your kind of involvement in the creation of these two sets?
Brian Ward from Shout Factory had a number of us in original cast, and like I said, I really was the new kid. So I am still friends with essentially everyone from those casts. But at that time, I really was paying attention to what was going on in the room when I wasn't working. And they had us in. with nothing particular planned. They said, we know you all spent hours together and days together and seasons together. So we just want to keep it loose. We'll feed some questions, but feel free to kick it around. Everybody was, what are we talking about? What are we going to do? And Brian Ward said, let's just roll tape and see what happens. And the next thing anybody remembered was 45 minutes later, they said, you know what, we're out of tape. And we kicked it around the same way we did then. Those were long sessions, vocally demanding. I'm not comparing that to heavy lifting, but they were vocally demanding. And Wally Burr, the director, had such a passionate sense of these galactic battles or epic battles that he would sort of guide everything in the directions it needed to go. If you didn't give 110 or more percent, then you didn't stay, because he required that. And I would like to think that's part of where the longevity comes from, is everybody cared. And in a larger sense, if you don't care about the characters, you don't care about what happens to the characters. And I think for whatever reason, we were all successful at creating that. The last guy who introduced me at a convention said, my next speaker is the guy who's responsible for me missing my first period class and rushing home from my last period class, depending on whether they were on in the morning or the afternoon. But I felt like the story couldn't go on if I wasn't there. That's pretty great to be a part of.
So like, I mean, I'm looking at some of your characters right now. So like, where does Grimlock and Spirit kind of stand out in like just the pantheon of characters you've done?
They stand. I mean, there is a panel question that tends to come up of what's your favorite character, and I'm not trying to be goody-goody about it, but my favorite character is the one I'm doing at the moment. Yeah, I do a pig named Orson in the Garfield show, and he's got his own thing, and his brothers are always trying to beat him up, and there's that. I got corn. Actually, I got two pigs. I'm not a pig, but I played one on television. Corn-fed pig is just, I guess I watched too many Dragnets growing up, but a nice skinny-brimmed hat and a little tie, and has to clean up after the duck. And there were other Transformers. Outback, the sit and vowel sounds that distinguished Outback. Long Haul had his own. Everybody, they all have some flavor. So I think the idea is you sort of reach out to a character, but you also allow the character to reach out to you. And I need to find something of me out of my experience for everything. Consequently, whatever I'm doing at the moment is the most important thing.
I was curious, like Transformers has become just a huge franchise at the box office now, and we have G.I. Joe coming out in a few weeks. So I was wondering, like, what's your take on these new live action versions of these classic cartoons that we've seen?
Primarily, first and foremost, they are creating a cinematic reality for something that we created an animated reality for. In that, I think they're unbelievably successful. Obviously, the live-action features seem to be rekindling an interest in how it all began. So we're finding new audiences as a result of that. Selfishly, I couldn't be happier about that. I go back to what I said about if you don't care about the characters, you don't care about what happens to them. These are epic I haven't seen the G.I. Joe, and the Transformers that I've seen are just such unbelievable eye candy as far as what they've been able to achieve, 100 feet in the air, 70 feet in the air. So for the roller coaster ride that they are, for the action adventure that they are, I think they're unbelievable cinematic accomplishments. But that said, I'll stand by that 1986 animated Transformers feature as also, I just thought it was brilliant in the surprises that it offered, in the twists and turns that it took at all the right times, and in the really clear delineation of characters and their similarities and differences.
So, like, is there anything that you mentioned some of the ones that you're working on now? Is there anything that you're kind of lining up that you might be starting up soon?
Well, game-wise, I have a very full plate, but the way that games work now is you're essentially not to talk about them until they release. I'll have a lot to talk about, but currently I'm doing Captain Cutter in Halo Wars. I'm doing Kingpin in Spider-Man Web of Shadows, Wilson Fisk. Doing Fred Dukes, the Blob in the X-Men Wolverine game. And Hugh Jackman's tracks are separate, so I have a big fight with him. He's jumping all over me, and I'm hitting him back for all I'm worth. But we're not in the same room. I just hear him in my headphones. And there's still a lot of people who thought Metal Gear Solid 3 was right up there, and I was the pain in that. And so I get around. I have a game called Infamous that just released, and that's a community where you start to see the same faces. Oh, I mean, in a larger sense, I think work breeds work, but only if the work is good. If you're either remembered well or badly in all of these situations. And you can always tell the game developer in the room because he's the guy in the corner that looks like he hasn't slept in 5 years. And because there are so many possibilities in this literally interactive game, the book of cues is like this. And so I don't want to say you move through it. You move through it fast by necessity, but also there's such a sense of understanding on the other side of the glass that sometimes they only stop us when you guess wrong. It's bizarre. It's almost like you're channeling that character's arc. You just sort of feel it off the page, because sometimes there's not time to entrust you with a big sense of story. You just sort of fit in. It's a game of jump rope, and it's going real fast, and you got to do it and not trip. Halo Wars, they did everything ensemble. They couldn't wait to show us new graphics and really include us in the process, and that's fantastic. Sometimes that happens, sometimes it's done isolated because you can't possibly get all the people together. So either way it works, and either way you leave with a sense of your involvement in it, but sometimes it feels a little disjointed at the time you're doing it.
So just finally, like, what would you like to say to the fans of these two original series for these two new amazing box sets on DVD, and what kind of other goodies we might be able to expect from this, along with the 90 or so classic episodes?
I would say it will exceed your expectations. It's eye candy, it's ear candy, it'll take you back and take you forward. And if you put these box sets on your coffee table, there's no one that won't talk about them. They really are eye-popping, and it's what happened. I'm not trying to overstate the goodness of all of this, but this is what happens when people who care and have that love for it. I have people bring their kids to meet me. But that generation that had that love for it then will feel all of that fulfilled in this set. I can't believe that anybody wouldn't. You can't miss it. There's special handling in every aspect of this thing. It just knocked me over and floored me. It's awesome. I have also written a book, and it's part teaching. A lot of it has come out of Comic-Con I've done for the past 11 consecutive years, and I've sat on panels. A lot of questions come up, and I realize as I answer questions that just from the number of decades that I've been allowed to do this, I actually have answers to the questions. Because I have answers, I have something to teach. It's in a book called Think Globally, Act Vocally, and Voice Virtue. And it'll be on iTunes and CD Baby. Can't promise when, but it's already in the works. And I have pre-release copies of it at Comic-Con, so it's starting to get heard by people who may have some interest in what I have to say.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, sir. Great to meet you.
Awesome.